So now let's talk about some creative financing deals, and actually it starts with super simple and go all the way to less simple, always to a little bit more complicated. So the first thing is, obviously, that's like a sleeper. Everyone kind of knows how to do this. Is this really only on here? If you're brand new and if you don't know how assignments works, let's talk about it for just a second. So let's put some names to it in a kind of similar situation. So we have some names to it, so it's easier to remember. Jim, let's say, agrees to sell you a lot for $10,000. The property is worth $100,000. It's a little bit of an extreme case. Like $100,000 deals, you typically don't get them for 10 grand. It's more of a mathematical example here, okay? So you might, these days, you might have to probably pay more like 30 or 40 grand for that kind of a deal. But it's the same thing. It's more like it's a numbers example to illustrate a few situations and a few kind of particularly kind of characteristics of when an assignment is a good deal and when it's not a good deal. Okay, so don't take that deal necessarily as a standard deal. So Jim agrees to sell you a lot for $10,000. The property is worth 100 grand. So now you sign as a buyer. Then you agree. Remember this agreement that we shared, that we talked about yesterday, has in it the provision that you can back out anytime for any reason. Second provision, you are allowed to market it. Third provision is you have as much escrow, as much close of time as you want to. Typically 3 to 6 months, and or 6 months is kind of standard these days. And number 4, you don't put earnest money deposit down, or if you do, just a few bucks. So then what happens is you sign as a buyer, but then what you do is you immediately market the property, and you'd say you find Paul agrees to buy it for you for $30,000. So it's on purpose selected with those numbers because I want to make a case. And what I want to illustrate is that in this case, what you can do, instead of a double closing and a double escrow where there's 2 sets of title companies, 2 extra sets of paperwork, you could simply do an assignment here. And let me simplify, if it's a standard assignment. In an assignment, the way you do this is that you simply take the agreement and say like, hey, are you willing to take this over? Great, here's my contract. I'm going to sign an assignment agreement that transfers my position in the contract as buyer over to you, and you become the buyer. But in that process, the buyer actually sees what you make on the deal. They see how much you have it on a contract for, and that's why this example is selected as it is. So do you think the buyer is going to have a problem seeing that you make $20,000 on the deal? No, because he makes $70,000 on the deal. If he can sell this deal for $100,000, or if it's a builder or something like that, is he going to be upset if you make 20 and he makes 70? No, he's not going to be upset. Right? He's not. So therefore, this is a good situation to do an assignment deal. All right, so in that case, Paul and you sign an assignment agreement stating that he buys your contract essentially for $20,000 for a $20,000 assignment fee. And with the assignment, Paul steps into your position in the deal But typically, in a standard assignment, Paul will see what you make on the deal. That is not a problem if you make a small amount, but it is a problem if you make a lot more money. Because there's a study that's been done one time where they basically said, two people in front, did that with lots and lots of people, like a scientific study. They put 2 people across the table from each other, and they basically says, here's $100. Like, one person gets to decide how this $100 is split between the 2 people, and the other person gets to decide if that is acceptable. If it's acceptable, it's being split like that. If it's not acceptable, nobody makes any money. So in essence, people sit across the table, and there's a free $100 bill in the middle. One gets to decide how it's going to be split. So technically, the guy that decides to be split could say, well, let's split 50-50, right? And when they did that, 100% of the time, the other party said, that's fair, let's do it. Sometimes the person that gets to select said, well, let's split it 60-40 in my favor, because I get to decide. Right? So they split it a little bit in his favor. And the other party says like, well, that's not really fair, but it's okay, 60-40, at least I make 40. Yes, you have an advantage, sounds good. Somewhere around 70-30, it started to become so unbearable to the other party that they're getting the shorter end of the stick that they said, no, I'd rather have no money than see you get the majority of the money. Right? It's free money. Right? It's free money. You could have still walked away $30, but they said like, no, I rather see, if somebody said like, yeah, it's do 80-20, majority of people say like, no, I'd rather get nothing. I'd rather have you see missing out on $80 and I just miss out on 20 than you screwing me over in this case, right? And that's actually kind of a picture with the assignment. So if you have a deal that if you were to sell this deal to the buyer not for 30, but for let's say $70,000, and you make a $60,000 assignment fee, and they will only make potentially $40,000 on that deal, they most likely are going to be very, very unhappy because they could perceive that to no longer be fair. Right? So does that mean you can't do that? No, but you have to do it in a different way. And what do you have to do that? You have to do a different way, in a way that Paul does not see what you're making. And there's a contract, for example, that we use in our coaching program that has that basically changes that. It has completely different wording, and it's a little bit ambiguous, but it's also still a clear contract that, in essence, does not disclose to the buyer what you're making on the deal. Right? So in that case, you can do it. Or if you can't hide it, then in that case, what you want to do, right? So this is the rest of the process. You basically, in this case, what happens, you have an assignment agreement. You then pass it to the title company, both the contract and the assignment. Paul sends the $30K to the title. Jim signs the seller document. Paul signs the buyer documents. You sign nothing anymore. You only sign the assignment agreement. You're no longer part of that deal, but the assignment agreement for $20K goes to you. But so you get assignment agreement. You get $20,000. Period. Right? So this is the easiest way. You're not going to be on title with an assignment. You're not going to be the owner even for a couple of minutes. You simply pass your right to buy the property on to somebody else. But again, back to the point. What if you want to make $60,000 on that assignment, and therefore the buyer Paul would only basically get it for $70,000, which now only leaves him $30,000 in upside in that deal. Well, in that case, you don't want to do an assignment. In that case, you want to do perhaps a double closing, or where you buy the property and then where you sell the property. And you can do that because in that case, it's two different kind of documents, because the title companies actually, if it's a double closing, the title companies have to disclose the fact that there's a double closing, but they don't have to disclose the actual numbers. So therefore, now they split it up into a buying transaction where you buy and a selling transaction where you sell. And you buy it for 10, and you sell it for 70, and you end up making $60,000, but the buyer does not know that you make $60,000 on the deal. Make sense? Now, sometimes the even better way for that, or sometimes the title companies don't want to do that, so they want to do transactional funding. So let's explain that quickly. Everyone knows transactional funding is basically when the title company says, yeah, you can buy this deal and you can sell this deal. This is all fine. We can do a double closing, but you need to bring your own money to the table. We will not allow our company does not allow for the buyer's money to be used to fund the entire transaction. So in that case, we use transactional funding. What that is, by the way, anyone in the room here provides transactional funding? Look at that. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hands up. So we have lots of transactional funders in our community that are willing to fund these deals. We have also some that we have vetted, that we know that have done deals, that we know you can trust, and so on. But because obviously somebody could potentially also like either not give you the money or let you hanging or not follow through and so on. So you want to make sure that you work with the ones that are approved. So with that said, if the title company, in this case, what happens? You do find a transactional lender. And a transactional lender will give you the money only for literally 1 day or 2 days. And the way the transactional funding works is basically, they basically said that they will confirm with the title company that all parties have signed everything and that the buyer's money is in escrow. Because if the buyer's money in escrow and everyone has signed everything, all they're waiting for is the seller's money. And the lender will provide the seller's money. But when everyone has signed everything already and all the other money is in, then the transactional funding guys know that they will get their money back. And then it's only a formality. So they send in the money for the deal. Then the deal closes. The title company now has the buyer's money and the seller's money. So let's do, I don't know if there's an example on that. Let's say it's a $50,000 sale. You do it as double closing. You have it under contract for 10 and you sell it for 50. Wholesale deal. So you only need, let's do a different example. Just forget everything, rewind, right? And let's go, let's say you have the property under contract for $40,000 and you're selling it for $70,000. So you need to bring $40,000 to the table. And you don't have $40,000 or you don't want to use your own money, so you use a transactional funder. So the transactional funder, basically, what happens is the buyer wires in $70,000 plus closing costs. The seller wants $40,000, but the title company forces you to bring $40,000 to the table plus closing costs. So you borrow from somebody $41,000 or $40,000, let's just say. So $40,000, it's ignored as the closing cost. They wire in, they confirmed everything is there, the buyer's wired in the 70, everyone signed their stuff. Now they wire in $40,000, and now the title company has $70,000 from the buyer, $40,000 from the seller. The title company now takes your $40,000 that transactional funder brought in and send it to the seller. And now you have a loan against the property. You own the property, and there's a lien against it. There's a loan against it for $40,000. Then they immediately record the documents for the purchase, for the sale of it, and they take the $70,000, and they take off the $70,000. They take 40 plus about $1,000 to $2,500, depending on how much the transactional funder charges. So let's say they charge $2,000. So they send $42,000 back to the transactional funder, and they give the remaining $28,000 to you. Done? That's how transactional funding works. You're basically getting a loan to buy the land, and then that loan is being paid off the next day or even the same day. And that's it. Right? And what's left over, it's your profit. It's kind of silly to do it that way. They could just use the buyer's money, but for some reason, title companies just sometimes don't like to do it. It's more like their own political environment, not political, I mean political, but more like their own rules. They're just particularly the large title companies, they're like, oh no, that's too crazy for us, we just won't allow it. Now there's a rumor out there that says that double closings are not allowed in some states. Bullshit. They're allowed everywhere in the United States, in all 50 states. What happens is that certain title companies have made a rule that they don't allow it. And with that, the title officer, who often just doesn't know all the details, they basically assume it's not allowed, assume it's illegal, so they tell you, oh no, that is not legal. Well, it is legal. There's title companies in every single state that do double closings where the money comes from the buyer and it's being used for everything. They're just not super easy to find. So sometimes it's way easier to find a title company that's willing to do double closing with transactional funding. And that's why we mention it. Because in that case, you're bringing your own money to the table from a lender. It just happens to be a purchase and a sale that happens in the same day. But you bring money to the table and the buyer brings money to the table. Now it's no longer an issue in any of the states. Okay? So you can actually do that also, if you want to, by doing it with two different title companies involved. It's a little bit more advanced, but you can do it such that title company A does the purchase where you purchase it, and title company B does the sale. Since it's two sets of money anyway, that's okay. So title company A, you buy the property. Title company B, you sell the property. All that needs to happen is the title officers need to communicate and need to make sure, hey, you got everything ready for the sale, you got the money in, for the purchase, for the end purchase, has the end buyer signed all the documents? Has the end buyer sent in the money in? Great. Has the buyer, and you obviously know you signed all your documents already, and then it's all good. Then you just need to get the transactional funding in here, and therefore you buy the property, you have a lien on it, then the second title company records their documents, pays off the lien, and sends you the money. It's the same thing, just with two different title officers in two different locations. Make sense? All right. So how do you make seller financing work if you don't get enough money down? Well, if you're Maria, who's made a bunch of money in land flipping already, then you basically go and simply carry the balance. You invest some of your own money in her deal, but in that situation that she just shared, she's getting pretty much all her money, well, not pretty much. all her money back with the 13th payment. Like she put $10,000, or she got it for $25,000, sold it for $45,000, and got I think 45 or 40, I think 45, and then got a $15,000 down payment, so she's short $10,000. So in that case, she used her own $10,000 to supplement the deal, but now she's receiving $800 a month. After 10 months, that's $8,000. After 12 months, that's $9,600. After 13 months, that's $10,400. So at the 13th payment, she has all her $10,000 back. So how about the return of investment in 13 months? Is that a good thing? It's pretty darn good. Does your bank give you, it's basically a 96% return of investment. Return on investment. Is a 96% return on investment a good thing? Yeah. All right. Can you get that at a bank? No. Can you get that in the stock market? Like rarely, right? Can you get that anywhere else? So here's the thing. Over time, as you make money, over a short time, sometimes in a matter of a few months or a few weeks, like Eduardo here, as you make money in this business and you make more and more money, it's not a bad idea to start actually funding that gap yourself, because otherwise that money just sits in a bank account producing nothing. And now you can produce you 96% returns, right? That's what we're talking about. But there's another way. What if you actually don't have the money, don't have the $10,000 to supplement, in this example, a real-life example that happened today here from Maria, or you just don't want to use the money for that because you have it earmarked for something else? Well, in that case, let's talk about the triple close. So the triple close is actually something that's a beautiful situation. That is basically, it's the same as a double close, only with seller financing. That's the starting point. So you do a double close with seller financing, but then you add a component to it. And now we're getting really into the area of creative finance. So the first thing is, let's say you have a property worth $100,000, and you put it under contract. It says buy, should say put it under contract. Put it under contract for $40,000. Great. Then you immediately turn around and put it on the market and sell it, and look to sell it. And you say, let's say you're not marketing it up to full market value, put it a little bit below. You're selling it for $90,000, and somebody comes, I love it, I want this property for $90,000, it's a good deal. I'll give you 20% down. What is 20% of $90,000? $18,000. Great. And then they basically say, and with that, that means that what it's called, you carry the rest, you carry the balance of $72,000. And by the way, if sometimes people are like, where do I get the $72,000 from? Anyone has that question? Right? Okay. Just to clarify, nobody raised their hand. You created the $72,000 in kind of like, in a way, out of thin air. Because what it is, it's like, it's not that you create a loan. It is creating a loan. But basically what you're saying is, hey, Mr. Buyer, I'm selling you this property for $90,000. You give me $18,000 down. And I agree to wait for the $72,000 over the next, I don't know how many years, for you to, I allow you to pay the rest off little by little. It's an installment sale. So the buyer brings in the $18,000. And the note buyer, let's assume in this case the note buyer buys this at a full face value, because it's a note that already has a built-in 15% interest rate. So the note buyer brings in $72,000. So now what does the title company in the bank? The title company in the bank now has $18,000 from the buyer and $72,000 from the note buyer. And in that case, the title company now everyone signs their documents. As a matter of fact, there is, thought there's a slide for that, but the way that works is the thing. The seller signs the selling documents. You sign the buying documents. And then also, you sign the selling documents to the buyer. And then the buyer, the end buyer, signs the buying documents. So that's one set. But then there's the other party involved, which is the note buyer. The note buyer now signs the note buying documents. And you also sign the note selling documents. So you bought the property. You sold the property with seller financing, and you sold the note. That's what's happening here. You buy the property, You sell the property with seller financing, and you sell the note. And when that happens is, the buyer brings in $19,000, the note buyer brings in $72,000, and the title company sits now on how much money? $90,000. $18,000 from the buyer, $72,000 from the note buyer. The title company now takes $40,000 and gives it to the seller. Now the deal works because the title company now has enough money sitting in the bank, in their account. So the title company now gives the seller $40,000, transfers the note into the note buyer's name. The note buyer now owns the note, and the note buyer starts now collecting on that note. And you receive $50,000 on that deal cash. So you've taken a deal that didn't work before and made it a deal that made you $50,000 because by structuring such that all of it happens at the same day, and you needed none of your own money, you bought the property, you sold the property with seller financing, but you had a gap, and how did you fill that gap? By selling the note right away and have the note buyer provide that cash. And now the title company has all the money to pay the seller to get the note into the note buyer's name, and you get the difference. In this case, you made $50,000. So you just bought a property, sold the property, and sold the note all in one day in one big 3-part transaction. So let's talk about a wrap. Do you guys know what a wrap is? Who does not know what a wrap is? And it's not what you get at Subway, right? So that's a sandwich anyway. So here's the thing. So what happens in a wrap is the following concept. The concept of a wrap is where you go and you buy a property with seller financing, and then you go sell it with seller financing, but what you pay the seller is this, and what the buyer pays you is that. You guys make sense? So basically it's the following. So let's say you have a seller willing to sell you, but sell the property to you, but the price that he's selling it to is too high to make that a deal. Right? So now what you do, but you ask the seller, well, Mr. Seller, I'm okay. I can pay you $90,000 or $80,000 for your property. If it's worth $100,000, let's say, I can pay you $80,000 for the property if you're willing to extend seller financing. And the seller's going to be like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, how about I give you $2,000 down and like $300 a month for the next, 10 years, and then I'll pay it off. And the seller might say, well, why not? A little cash flow is better than having your property just sit there. So in essence, you buy the property with seller financing. You become the buyer, but at very favorable terms to you. Like low interest rate, low monthly payments, low down payment. Right? So, and then you agree that to a loan down, low interest rate, and low payments. Exactly. So then what happens is you turn around and you now resell the property at just a little bit more, but with a big down payment and with big monthly payments. Right? So the high down payment, high interest, and high monthly payments. So let's do this example. Let's say the property is worth $100,000. The seller is willing to sell it to you at $75,000. Okay? So 75 grand. And you agree that you will just give them a $5,000 down payment. Alex, what happened here? Those railings are gone. Did the union finally agree to take them off? You took them off? Okay, well, you violated the union. They're going to be upset with us. Anyway, so with $5,000 down and 5% interest for 18 years, let's say, no balloon. Just simply you agree that you're going to pay that off for $75,000 with $5,000 down, 5% interest for 18 years. Like, are there people who are going to do that? Yes, in order to get a higher interest rate, get a higher price, people willing to carry terms, and not everyone wants 18% interest or 15% interest, things like that. There's a lot of people who say like, well, this property sits there producing nothing right now. If I have money, I would just put it in CDs at 4 or 5%. So why don't you just pay me 5%? Sure. So you do that, and the monthly payment would come down to $500.91, which you now are paying. You can also negotiate that you start the payment only in 2 months or 3 months. You don't necessarily have to start, oh, well, there we go. It's already there. That you start the payments only in 2 months. So now that gives you 2 months to sell this property again. So now you turn around and you sell it, and you sell it for a full $100,000 with a $20,000 down payment, and with 15% interest, and for 18 years, the same time period, but your monthly payments are $1,073.35 that you collect now. You collect that kind of money. And you can already see the results, right? You pay the seller $591 each month, but you collect $1,073 each month. And that's in the middle, it's called the spread, and that spread is a $572.44 positive cash flow each month that you make on a deal that you otherwise would have had to skip on. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. That's creative finance again, right? So that means that $572.44 over 18 years is $123,647.04. That's your profit on a deal. And it consists of a few components. First of all, it consists, plus you have the $15,000 in your pocket because, what was? You paid $5,000 as a down payment, but you received $20,000 as a down payment. So you have $15,000 cash in the pocket, and you have a spread of $572.44 every single month. Is that cool stuff? Is that good stuff? That's what we're talking about. Again, so your total profit on that is $138,647, including those $15,000. Or your ROI in this deal is 2,672%.